hosting by PharmaShots. So we are today here talking about a key topic here, which is a mastering a patient-centric approach for the treatment in biopharma. I am Aditya Singh. I'm editor-in-chief of PharmaShots, and today we have with us our panelists here, Sharpe, Leesa, Gentry, and Shaun Bagai. So we are going to, okay, so before we are going to start, just a few housekeeping things. Everyone, please keep your mic on mute. And second thing, if you have question, you can put it in chat box, which we are going to take later after we finish this webinar. So talking about patient centricity, it's not just a buzzword, it's an approach, it's a philosophy where we need to put a patient first or patient above all of the other parameters so that patients should be heard. We need to understand their need. We need to understand their needs, values, and preferences. So I would like to introduce first to you Sharpe, where he is one of our key, key opinion leader or key digital leader here, who is a stage 4 melanoma survivor and whose journey from patient to advocate has inspired many. I'll come to you, TJ. Let me finish a quick intro, and then I'll come to you so that you should talk about you should tell about yourself further. Shaun is CEO of RenovoRx, and he is a seasoned medtech leader. And they are working they have a so RenovoRx is working in the space where they are helping pharma companies to conduct a clinical trial with a focus here on patient centricity. Leesa is Chief Commercial Officer of RenovoRx, and she leads the team. She has 30 years of experience in clinical development. So obviously we have a very experienced panelist here who can share their insights on patient centricity. So let me open the floor to Sharpe, and then Shaun, you should be next, and then Leesa, so you can give a brief introduction, whatever I have not covered. Thank you.
Thanks, Singh. Nice to see everybody. Sharpe, patient engagement expert, and also stage 4 melanoma survivor. The 32nd version of the story is diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma 13 years ago now, and veteran of 2 clinical trials, one of which I was the first in human, and had to navigate through a number of difficulties in that first trial, just to find the trial, then to get the trial started, and then eventually find a second therapy, which ended up working for me, ended up being on the second trial for what is now Keytruda, and turned that into first an opportunity to be an advocate, and then a career working in biopharmaceuticals and clinical operations, becoming a patient voice, but an educated patient voice and an empowered patient voice to speak not just with my story, but with the experiences of as many other patients and diverse patients that I could speak for or represent to those who are designing clinical trials and the drugs and devices that are being tested on those trials.
Perfect. Shaun, about you?
That's an amazing beginning of the story, TJ. It's this is why we do what we do. So I'm glad you're here. And
Thank you.
You had successful treatments, and love to hear your insights on what you've seen from the patient side. On the technology side, I've spent about 25 years in medical technology industry, initially geared for med school, declined med school upon acceptance. So hopefully build therapies that would really help patients at a broader level than I could as a single physician. I've been lucky that I've been able to find companies that would drive that. RenovoRx started with a patient and a physician who saw a need and an idea. And one thing that you'll see is a theme throughout this webinar is really focusing on patients will change care. And it's what we've seen failures. And the flip side is when you have a medical technology or an industry that's focusing on the money and on a business and not the patients. And with the failure to innovation there is when you're looking at how do we take this cool thing I invented or developed and try to fit it into patients. And where we start from is a need and an idea, and then a testing that idea. And that'll be the theme throughout today. RenovoRx, as was mentioned earlier, we developed a new technology for the treatment of solid tumors with the bulk of our data in pancreatic cancer. And for those who know pancreatic cancer, really nothing works. And we found a new mechanism of action and success so far where patients don't have the same side effects as chemotherapy. And we're seeing patients live longer. And it's really focusing on that need for patients, not just to destroy a disease or a tumor, but to treat the patient as a human being and look at actually having patients have quality of life and getting to live versus just getting treated. And from the clinical research side and clinical development side, it's very important to keep that in mind. And that'll be the theme for today as well.
Over to you, Leesa.
Thank you. Hi, as mentioned, Leesa Gentry. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for RenovoRx. I work very closely with Shaun. It's great to be here with both TJ and Shaun. And TJ, I know everything that Shaun said. It's so wonderful to have someone who's firsthand been through this journey to support this. Throughout my career of about 30 years in clinical drug development, I have always very much gravitated to areas of high unmet medical need, focusing for about 15 years of my career on infectious disease, and particularly multi-drug resistant TB. And now coming back full circle to where I started, which is in oncology, as Shaun mentioned, locally advanced pancreatic cancer, which is a huge unmet medical need. And that's why I'm here working at this organization today. So very happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we can provide some good insights today.
Thank you. So let's jump in, as we are a little bit constrained with the time. Let's jump into the presentation here. And I would like, so sorry for that. Okay, I would like to invite Leesa to talk about patient centricity, where she is going to talk about what is patient centricity and why it's important.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, so this is a long definition here that you see on the screen, but basically what patient centricity means to me is a complete paradigm shift from the way that we used to do clinical trials maybe 2 or 3 decades ago, where it's not only an extra layer of work that we have to do as clinical trial specialists, but it really does create a win-win-win across all stakeholders. It's about putting the patient's lives first, not just making sure that we're capturing clinical endpoints. It's ensuring that we use that to guide decision-making and making overall the burden of participation in clinical trials much easier on patients. So that could involve using tools like ePro or other more passive wearable devices on the technology side to make it an easier process for patients to be included in studies, but also about choosing better endpoints or additional endpoints that are more impactful and resonate with patients. Starting with endpoints, starting with trial design, making the whole process easier, and then ending with building trust and a true partnership so that patients can have access to information about the results of the trial as well. That's really what patient centricity means to me.
DJ, would you like to add something here?
I sure would. That's the beauty of being a patient, is we always have something to say. But we'll try to make this concise because we have a lot of topics to cover.
Yep.
And Leesa did a great job of teeing us up for a number of the topics we'll talk about today. You'll hear some more about my personal journey as we go along today. I kind of want to just start with the perspective of a patient advocate, someone who's lived the experience, but also has worked with many of you, or some of you, hopefully, in this field, or you've worked with someone like me. And there's 2 distinct things I think that help, I don't know if define is the right word, but make truly meaningful patient centricity, or enable truly meaningful patient centricity. The first thing is authenticity in your partnerships. That means when you work with patients, when you work with advocates, patient advisory groups, or others who have a vested interest in the success of your clinical program, that there's an alignment between you and those other stakeholders, is what we are, beyond just treatment goals. That's the main thing. That and Leesa and Shaun both mentioned that in some way, but you align more than just treatment objectives. You are working with a patient population that may or may not be responding to your treatment, and your role in being authentic is to be almost agnostic of a therapy choice and work with that patient or those patient groups so that you have created a relationship in that partnership. That's the first thing I push in patient centricity. The second part is, I call it the ambitious integration of patient input. And I would say that every person that we would talk to here has had some degree of patient engagement, in air quotes, at some point in their career, because it's been quite a buzzword since pretty much I've started this over a decade ago. However, you can kind of see the difference in some of the integrations here, and the things that I look for is that there's an intent in the interactions, that you're doing something with purpose. When you engage with patients, you're not just engaging for engagement's sake to check the box off, the proverbial box, but you actually have an intention when you engage. You are trying to elicit high value information, so that depending on where you sit in this world, that can be anything from protocol or schedule of activities review to marketing communications, and there's a number of things we'll talk about later, but that you're looking for not just a patient story, but actual high value information that will help you develop impactful insights, which is my next little point. Not just input, but actual insights out of information. How and where does the information you get and the input you get used? How does it affect what you're going to do? And then the final part of it, the double E's at the end, is you execute on whatever strategy you may have, and you evangelize that strategy across your organization. Because if you do patient engagement in a silo, it's sort of like a tree falling in the woods. If you do patient engagement and no one knows about it, are you really doing patient-centric or patient engagement activities, or is it just for show's sake? Make sure you evangelize what you do and how you engage.
Perfect. I think you summarized all of the webinar in your 2-minute talk. So let's jump into our next slide here. Sorry, I don't know what exactly the problem is, but it's moving so fast. Okay. So here as TJ already talked about it, what is the key significance of patient-centric approach? And Leesa already put a light on it. So it's mostly the part discussed. Shaun, would you like to add something here, and then we'll jump on to the next slide?
Yeah, for sure. And TJ, you mentioned intentions, and you're spot on. It's not just good intentions. It's about driving forward with intention. And as Leesa mentioned, trust is important. If you think about clinical research, and I didn't realize this till later in my career, I think of it from a researcher, from getting a product to help patients to get to market at a broad level. But what's interesting in being out and working with physicians and patients in the field is hearing this enrollment challenges that some hospitals have, where patients don't want to feel like a guinea pig. They feel like they're being tested on. And I've always felt that we're providing a new therapy, an option, a technology. I mean, TJ's story is the way I always think about clinical trials on. Nothing else works. Here's an opportunity to try something new and exploratory that could really save your life. It looks like it has for many patients. But understanding that that's not true for every patient, they're not always fully read up on the new technologies, and they may feel like a guinea pig. But getting down to their level of understanding of the industry in the field and really building that trust, understand what it's like for them as a patient, really can change the way we do business, the way we change to do clinical trials. When patients feel heard and respected, trust grows, and then from that trust, we can drive better designs of studies, and also have better participation. At least going to go to more in detail to make sure the trials are done at a high rigor. So really personalizing care around the patient needs, meaning that the therapy fits their lives. Now we're trying to push their lives into how we want to run a clinical trial. The clinical development program is important. And with that trust building, eventually we get better adherence to protocols, we get trials done faster, we get patients not dropping off. This can reduce costs for the clinical development process, and eventually reduce costs to the healthcare system as we're more efficient in how we get new technologies, new therapies to patients.
Awesome. So that's overall of the what a patient-centric approach looks like. And I would say Shaun, TJ, and you, Leesa, have put all of the insights here. So let's quickly jump on to this. First, we like to share some of the insights from this study, which was conducted in 2020, where they put the patient-centered care CHF, COPD patients, and the probability for cost effectiveness is 93% if you put patient as a center for the study. Leesa, your thought on this?
Yeah, so when I was looking over this study, it was very striking. I think this is intuitive in many ways. It's really the arc of our entire discussion today, that this patient centricity isn't just a good idea. It's not just good for patients. It's also good for the entire industry and all of the stakeholders. And I think this study really shines a light on that with some solid data, that there's a 93% probability of cost effectiveness when you use this approach in clinical trials. This is something that I see intuitively in our own practice, that if you create a trial environment where patients want to participate, they feel engaged, they can adhere to your requirements to the protocol, and they stay in the study until they complete, that actually creates a much more cost-effective and faster route to a marketing approval. So I think that's really the message here, which is this is not just a good idea. It's not just altruism. It is the right thing to do. But on top of that, it's actually good for health systems cost, and it's also good for business.
Awesome. So obviously, let's move on to next slide, where we want to know how these ideas translate into action. So yeah. So how it looks like is that patient centricity, and then it comes to study design, and then patient, and then plain language. So basically, if we focus the patient centricity endpoint here, we can guide through the whole process, and we can definitely get a better result. TJ, your input here.
There's a lot of things on this. So I'll kind of touch on two of they sort of all flow together. So it's a nice little slide that shows how patient engagement can be threaded through the entirety of clinical operations. The study design considerations really kind of jump out at me. The patient review of protocols, the potential pitfalls, and a schedule of assessment I kind of mentioned a little earlier. The undue burden that will impact enrollment and intention, like those metrics that do end up becoming key metrics for the industry. They sort of start in this early part when you co-create or you involve patients in designing a clinical research program, and when you have them involved in patient meaningful endpoints. Those first two circles really come together to create a more optimized trial experience. I think that is one of the things that we as in the royal we of patient engagement professionals, and especially patients who have been working in this area for a long time, push to the industry that you will save. There seems to always be time and budget to do things over, but not to do it right the first time. And we're hoping that we can avoid that with just a little bit of an ounce of prevention instead of the pound of cure. Integrating feedback. That's another area where we look at. I've worked with Transcelerate on a study feedback questionnaire that is out there publicly. If you're familiar with Transcelerate, go to their website and look for their study feedback questionnaire. And part of what patient engagement professionals like myself articulate to the industry is that patients and especially clinical research participants, there's a strain of altruism that runs through most of us. We're doing this because we would like to see a healthier life, a longer life, but we also want to see that people that are going to get our diagnoses have a little bit of a better chance than we do. And when a patient is willing to provide feedback, especially if you make that feedback easy and timely to provide, that you're going to improve maybe not that patient's experience immediately in the study, but you're going to improve the overall clinical operations experience for patients on that study, and hopefully inform future programs on how to be a little bit more patient-centric, patient-engaged. And the last part of that, the plain language summary, I'll turn it over to Leesa and Shaun. The plain language is invaluable, and that starts really in that patient-centric box in the front. So we can almost make plain language a sort of a thread through all of them, because when you are explaining, when you're giving information about a trial, and you're giving it in some plain language that potential participants can understand, you start checking those the accrual boxes. You start getting patients who will stay on your study, and the retention rate will climb because they understand what they are getting into. They understand what their commitment is and what their participation will most likely look like. And when you get off the study, you want to know what happened. If you're a patient, you want to know what happened. Hey, what happened on TJ's study that was finished 9 years ago? Do I need to go look at it on clinicaltrials.gov or try to decipher something or put it in ChatGPT? Or is there something out there that already gives me in plain language, here's what we researched, here's what we found, and here's how it will impact this population or subpopulation or here's how it might impact a population or subpopulation of patients. And that kind of plain language effort, it's sort of like the ribbon on top of the present. You don't want to just give your gift without that little pretty package that it's meant to be. And while scientists can understand study results, the people who ultimately are most impacted by them are the ones that we really need to be able to reach out and communicate with and talk to them at their level.
Great. Shaun, you want to add to it?
Yeah, it's a very good point, DJ. The making patients understand, and I've seen this before, where physicians talk at a medical science level, where they're not comprehended why they're doing things, and this kind of goes to the next couple of slides as well, is having them understand the why will keep them engaged and informed, and make them want to be part of it. And you really touched on something that's very interesting on the altruistic side, is having the physicians talk about, you may not, as part of the consent forms, which are like a fine print, you may not have any benefit from this, but other patients may. And hearing that from our patients as well, when we were very earlier on, they said, look, if nothing comes out of this, but I can help the next patient, that's going to be fantastic. And it's great. On pancreatic cancer side, where now we sort of have some results where they're really doing well, but having patients engaged in that process of, this may help you, this can help you, and this will really help other patients like you, really resonates well. Leesa, what's your experience there?
Yeah, I completely agree. Altruism is always a big piece of why someone chooses to be generous enough to enter our clinical trials. Something that TJ said really resonated with me, because I think it's actually the one area where industry hasn't really caught up, even myself included. I think we could do a better job with the plain language. There's a lot of focus on patient-centric endpoints and feeling better and functioning better and quality of life and patient engagement and patient experience data. Those things are happening very rapidly now, especially with AI tools and the things that we might talk about later in the course of this conversation. But I think we do fall down a little bit when we don't provide that information back. From a personal experience, I think where everyone's pushing to either get the data published in a peer-reviewed journal or get the package ready to go to a regulatory body. And we sometimes forget that we need to make sure that the people who were involved in our study and those who might follow still also need to sort of know what happened in this. One thing that I think that we have done at RenovoRx that's been very helpful is utilizing some illustrative video tools to help patients understand the procedure as they're going to be going through this in the study. But one of the things that I'm gonna take back as an action item today is to make sure that we loop in how to use plain language summaries back to our site so they can give these to our patients, even in parallel to preparing for publications and other regulatory packages.
Thank you, Leesa. So I have a quote here where if you say that when patients are partners, outcomes aren't just clinical, they are emotional, psychological, and deeply human. So the insights you get after you make your patient the partner in the clinical studies, it's lit up a different world. It's moved to a different kind of insights we can generate from there. All right, so moving on to next slide here is, yeah, Shaun, you want to start with us? Why patient-centric matters in biopharma?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is we're focusing here on patients, and as I kind of said in the beginning a little bit, we started with innovation. Is that a lot of times those innovations that we think will make a good business tool or a good sales product. And what's interesting is the patients are the best innovation catalysts, because if you really focus on where the needs are and what patients need, that's what drives the best development that will have ultimate clinical success, can reach more patients, and eventually financial success and revenue and sales. And so I do believe that if we focus on that, we can actually drive better medical innovation by looking at patients. And as I mentioned before, a lot of technologies never make it because they're so focused on something that's really not needed. And at RenovoRx, for example, as I described, this is one of the rare things. It was simply an idea that a physician saw in the operating room thinking there's got to be a better way. There's a need here. And then building on that and designing our trials around the patient needs has really led us to the success we've had today. So it is the patient center that drives innovation in medical care.
Yeah, Leesa, you want to talk about the regulatory part here?
Yeah, sure. Just to build on what Shaun said in driving innovation, ensuring that you have both clinical endpoints as well as more patient experience endpoints creates a better package, as I was mentioning before, when you go to the regulatory bodies. I know FDA and EMA and others are definitely moving towards the need to have proof that patients were involved in this process from the beginning. So you actually have a stronger package. You have, as Shaun said, a product at the end of the day that is going to resonate with patients and be something that they want. And so that does create market differentiation, starting with the regulatory process. I don't know that we're yet moving completely away from clinical endpoints. That's sort of gone round the bend a few times before. My sense is that FDA and EMA are still going to want to see things like survival curves. But if you can layer in, oh, and by the way, the survival curve is better, and in addition to that, patients are feeling better while they're on the treatment, that actually creates a stronger package.
Awesome. So that put the emphasis on how patient centricity is pretty much important in biopharma. Let's take a transition toward the inclusion of technology. And as an AI enthusiast, I would like to talk, like, I'm very much excited wherever there is inclusion of AI. So Leesa, would you like to add how the patient enrollment is, or digital enrollment and digital help helping you with the clinical trials or patient-centric clinical trials?
Absolutely. So I want to preface this by saying that I go into new technology waves with open eyes. I've been around and seen them come and go before, but I do think that AI tools are going to be huge game changers as we go forward. As everyone in the industry understands, patient enrollment is the major blocker to getting things to market more quickly. Patient enrollment in clinical trials doesn't seem to match the number of patients who are available and willing to participate. So utilization of AI tools is going to make that a much faster process. There's many different data sets that can be reviewed much more efficiently by an AI agent than by a human. In fact, we actually have one of our clinical sites right now working on our phase 3 study who's using an AI in-house grown tool to evaluate their EMR and identify patients across about 30 different community hospitals and identify them as potential patients for the study and all the studies that they're working on there. And it's been hugely successful. So enrollment moving faster is going to change the game on the entire cost effectiveness and time to market for all new products.
Yeah, TJ, your thought, because obviously we heard a technology point from the biopharma side, but then what do you think? Is it helping? Is it overwhelming, or it's completely of no use? So I put 3 words together. Your thought, yeah.
I think we're still in sort of the Wild West phase of technology. It feels like it is rapidly changing. And, you know, part of my career has been working with a couple of different technology service providers and simply going from like an e-suite for an e-color and e-consent to the explosion of technology tools that we have right now. We can't do a webinar or a conference without talking about all the AI possibilities at this point. So I think two of the things I think that we can focus on when we talk about digital health technologies and the use of things like AI and machine learning, that we still want to remain focused on the benefits to the person and not just the research on the disease. So, you know, there's a slice of technology that is going to empower trials that are going to be better, faster, process data much better. And I want to make sure that, you know, as a patient voice in the room, I'm continually reminding that the cool, shiny new toys also will impact patients. So how are we balancing getting more data and more insights with what that impact is on patients? And then the other part of it that I really love, and it kind of is sort of was that slide and this slide a little bit, maybe as a transition, is that there's a huge opportunity here for the industry to add significant value to a patient's medical journey. We can now, in very, very close to real time, extrapolate what is happening in my life based on medical data. And we're not just talking about the CT scans and the blood draws that we do every 8 weeks on a trial, every 12 weeks. You know, we are looking at wearables, digital health, other digital health technologies that can integrate in very near real time with other devices or other data collection mechanisms, and really for the first time in a very long time, first time ever, understand the impact that potentially, sorry, it's my alarm for my kid, understand what the drugs that we're developing, how are they impacting a person immediately, and what are those lingering impacts that you will see, and how does that tie in with other things that are occurring in their life, not just within the realm of the clinical trial at the site or in the clinic, but really what else is happening in my life that is impacting how a drug or a device is impacting my health.
That's I would say that's a great insight from someone who being a patient and now advocating the patient rights or patient centricity. Shaun, would you like to add something here that then we'll jump on to the final slide?
Yeah, I think that AI will transform clinical trials initially. TJ, you mentioned something that resonated, and this is something I don't believe we're there yet. But if you look at if AI tools, and we'll probably get in there, you probably know more about this than I do, but they can kind of see how they're impacting your life and your journey in real time. That could actually help us better support patients for treating side effects or coming to the hospital sooner if there's an issue, or catching something with an experimental technology or drug before it happens or as it's happening. So I can see that being a major impact. Obviously, faster drug discovery, using AI tools. There's so much data out there on what drugs work, what drugs don't work, why they work, and what patients, and we don't know this giant data set. So that can impact the speed of which we discover new drugs, and probably at lesser cost to the companies and the systems. And as Leesa mentioned, faster recruiting. And what's really interesting and important to me, again, we're not there yet, and the FDA hasn't come along there yet, but given how AI technology is coming back to that data set, right now we're running a randomized phase 3 pancreatic cancer trial, and half of our patients are getting a drug that's been around forever and we know doesn't work. We have the data there. With AI, we can actually case match eventually and do a single arm studies that would go for approval. The worst thing I hear from patients is, I got randomized to control arm. I'm getting what's out there right now. I'm not getting your technology. So it'll be great, you know, on the altruistic nature, as much as we're almost done with the study, it'd be great that going forward, we don't have to give patients what we already know doesn't work, and we can actually treat all the patients, hopefully with something that could work.
Thank you. So let's jump on for our final insights here before we take our questions. This is a big picture, and this is something which is patient centricity is helping us to get a win-win situation where patients are getting better experiences and more control over the whole study. And biopharma companies accelerate innovation, and obviously because of the involvement of patients, the costs are being reduced. And finally, the providers, where they build a stronger outcome and then deeper trust. So it's overall helping all of the three stakeholders to help like each other, so that we can have a drug in a market so quickly, or with a great input from the patients. And after the trust has been built between patient, provider, and biopharma, it's very easy to take that product into the market. So final thoughts, I'll come to TJ first to you, and then Leesa, and then Shaun, and then we'll move to the questions.
Sure. All of these big pictures and the win-win, you know, I call it the rising tide floating all of our boats method, really is in concept a fantastic idea. And there's very little pushback that says, yes, we should involve patients, we should involve our sponsors, we should involve the sites and ensure that we're not overly burdening them as well. It's sort of, where does the rubber meet the road, and are we actually staying true to the things that we aspire to be? You know, it's a very I put ambitious in the first ambitious insights or integration, whatever it was that I said, that if you are easily meeting your patient engagement aspirations, then maybe you're not quite setting them high enough, because there's truly an opportunity here for patients to be involved, but to impact things directly. And I think of it like this, you know, especially when you talk about things like digital health, you know, if in the continuum, if I understand clearly as a patient, there's your consent, what I'm agreeing to do, and to partner with the sites and the sponsors on whatever it is, and then all of a sudden there's your protocol review and your schedule of events, then I as a patient am more likely to become a willing partner in research. And that's not just giving my blood, that's things like filling out you know, ECOAs and diaries, and being involved in extra activities, especially when I understand the potential benefit to me or people like me. And that last part, I think, is probably the most important part, because that's the crux of what we talked about at the beginning. It is getting patients involved for patient-aligned outcomes, and understanding patient preferences, and like Shaun mentioned earlier, meeting patients where they are instead of having to drag them to a a trial site or a location and turning them into a partner instead of the old buzzword of subject.
Shaun?
Yeah, TJ, that's a great point, and part of that as well is really looking at what patients consider in trial design. So I'm curious, probably not this webinar, but in general, going through that process, how you would have designed the clinical trials that you were involved in differently, and I guarantee that there are a lot of things you want to change, and that's something that we probably could have done better in the beginning of this study, and we modified along the way. Is what are the patient needs to make sure they're engaged, and listening to them, and actually transforming our trial design along the way to fit the standard of care better, to have better recruitment and have patients stay on the study. That makes it more convenient for them, and then seeing that you're actually trying to work with them on not making them subject, like you said, TJ. And the second piece is using some technology in being informative. Leesa had mentioned we've got a technology that localizes chemotherapy, which a picture's 1,000 words, but a physician showing a patient that video on how we localize the chemotherapy makes them much better understand why there could be an advantage to this therapy, and being on the trial could be beneficial for them. So both of those points in the beginning for trial design, and then informing them along the way, I think will come back in spades.
If we have a few more hours, Shaun, we can talk through all that if you want.
Exactly.
Leesa, final closing thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So for me, what success really looks like here is that any patient who wants to participate in a clinical trial can do so, and that clinical trials and clinical practice become much more meshed together, so that this is an option for many more people. We talk to physicians who are working at very large hospitals doing a lot of trials, and they have less than 25% of their patients on clinical trials. Why is that? So if we use this patient-centric approach, we layer in this technology and we get support from regulators, the Venn diagram of that can actually get us to the point where we are offering clinical trials to any patient who is eligible and interested.
Great, and this leads to our closing comment here, and then we talked about all of the patient centricity. We have talked about how these patient centricity is helping providers, biopharma, and obviously the regulator with the great results there. So now it's time to hear the thought from our audience. We would like to invite some questions here. So we have 4 or 5 already. They have already posted 4 or 5 questions here. I'll ask the questions, and then I'll ask the panelists to answer this based on their expertise. However, if the panelists think they can want to add it more, they can anytime they can add it more to it. So first question is from Dipanshu, is that how can involving patient in clinical trial design lead to better therapies?
So maybe I'll.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what I was just commenting on. I appreciate the question. I think I mentioned this earlier on. If you're designing a therapy for the purpose of selling it, it's not going to be as successful. But if you see what the need is of a patient, and for example, in our technology, we don't just increase survival potentially, we also decrease toxicities and side effects a lot. And being able to have patients express that, design it in a manner that they can express that. Leesa mentioned quality of life surveys in the beginning as one tool of use forever. Listening to patients on how we can better deliver those surveys and tools, and the design of the study can lead to a therapy that we might do differently to make sure that they're better for patients in the long run. And TJ, I'm sure you have plenty to add that as well.
Like I said, we probably another few hours, and I think that was really the what we were trying to get throughout this entire conversation is what does this ultimately mean for me? How do I hopefully incorporate and justify this in my organization? And I would say there's an easy short answer, and there's a much longer, more accounting-like answer. And the easy answer is it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to involve the people who you are again, subjecting, I hate to use that word, but that sort of puts it in the context, to some very difficult medical procedures, ultimately that's going to benefit you as a company or corporation, and also a patient population and humanity in general. So I think when we put the lens on it that we're doing this and we're making a small investment in ensuring that the people who are going to bring us commercial success are on board with what we're doing, I think that is, call it karma if you want, call it good customer relations, but that it allows you to connect with the people who you were trying to serve, sell to, whatever context you want to put it in. It allows you to connect your business with their medical needs on a human level. There's other justifications for ROI and for developing extensive or somewhat engaged programs, but I think when you boil it down, that you don't need much more ROI than we're going to be working with this group of people, and we need to meet them on a human level.
Awesome. So we have a related question here as well, which is, what kind of support do patients usually need during a trial?
I can start with this one, although I'm sure TJ probably has a better answer for most of these, but I can maybe give some thoughts from the clinical trial operations side. So the answer to this question is really, it's kind of fit for purpose, and it depends on the patient population, it depends on the geography, it depends on the indication that you're studying, and it depends on the individual person who's participating in your study. Generally, right off the top, you can typically expect that offering transportation assistance, lodging. I've given out meal baskets before, depending on the location where you're operating. So it really kind of depends, but usually it's sort of just the ability to continue to get to the site and needs to travel and so forth, so that people who are further away geographically can still participate in trials. On a very specific level, I would give an example. There was a study I was operating in many countries across the world. One of them was Peru. And in this country, the sponsor who was involved was offering cost to pay for surgeries if they were indicated for the patient's overall treatment care. And this patient actually did qualify for the surgery that would very likely save their life. And the patient refused the surgery, even though it was listed as a benefit in the ICF. And we, instead of glossing over that, we asked some questions about why did this patient refuse the surgery? And the answer we got back was, this patient has a child and they can't afford the child care when they're in the hospital. So it wasn't in the ICF as a benefit, but I contacted the IRB. I said, this is what we're doing, and we paid for the child care. So that's an example of a very fit for purpose. Ask the questions. Don't just assume everybody needs the same thing, because it's going to be very different depending on all those factors I mentioned.
And that's an awesome example, or like a real life example which you put in. Teacher, what about the emotional support?
Just to touch on that, Leesa, fit for purpose is totally the right thing to do. Think about all the burden you're going to save, not just the patients, but your study sites who represent you out there to patients. We're lining up webinars for PharmaShots here in the future. The emotional burden and the emotional toll. I think a lot of hospitals, especially bigger research centers, have done a decent job of addressing being able to support the patient. So the two things I would encourage who's ever listening to make sure that you check this box. Ensure that the sites that they're using are appropriately giving the information, so not overwhelming someone with a water, the drinking through the fire hose of here's everything you know about this, about pancreatic cancer or melanoma or whatever it is, but you're actually able to utilize resources. You as a patient can utilize resources at the site that maybe a sponsor helps support, so that I understand the information that I'm getting when I need to understand it. And that's not always going to be, here's your binder of stuff, go home and read it. And the second, and this one gets overlooked all the time, is how are you supporting the people who are supporting the patient. What are you doing for caregivers, and what are you doing for the family, like Leesa just mentioned in that awesome example, that are going to optimize your trial's success by continuing to get your patients to the clinic to adhere to the protocol, and work that into your study budget, not just with a generic line item, but there is going to be very fit for purpose things, like Leesa said, that are going to be different from place to place and from person to person. So make sure that you're supporting the entirety of the support system that a participant relies on to be able to participate in your study.
Yeah, that's I can relate this with the question exactly, so that we can able to understand the feelings of the patient, not only what the results you want or how the outcome is going to be. I'm going to skip one question here that's about the digital tools and going towards what are the incentives exist for companies to adopt patient-centric approaches in clinical trial design, which is, I think, a great question here from Rudra.
Yeah,
Shaun,
so I mean, from a business perspective, this is an easy one. I mean, as I mentioned, the altruism of patients wanting to enroll in trials is one thing, but I think Leesa maybe touched on this as well, is that everyone in our company, for example, is passionate about cancer care and for patients. And most people who come in this industry, living in Silicon Valley, where you can make a lot of money doing other things than clinical trials and drug development and device development, is we come into it because there's a mission, a passion to actually change medicine and really help patients. From a business perspective, it's very simple. The faster we get patients rolling in a study, the more they adhere to the protocol, the more rigorous the trial, the more they stay on and not drop out. The faster we get the trial done, the quicker we get to market, the quicker I can return an investment for my investors and hopefully build this again. So it's beautiful in the sense because it hits on both sides. It's better for patients. It's as TJ mentioned, it's the right thing to do. But from a business perspective, it is definitely a win-win-win in that perspective, because it helps our business get to our technology back into patients faster and then get in the commercial realm as well.
All right, and that leads to our last question here, where talking about the regulator. How does the FDA assess whether a trial meaningfully reflects the patient experience? Leesa,
that is an excellent question. So kudos to the person who asked that question. If there was someone on the webinar who was from the FDA, I would point the question there. Because the bottom line answer is, I don't think we really know yet, because I think TJ mentioned earlier in the webinar that this is the Wild West, and this is definitely the case. So FDA hasn't really put out specific guidance or regulations on this. It's just sort of in the ether that they want to see it. That will start to solidify over time, and they will probably look to industry to guide as well. The way that I would choose to try to ensure that this is clear is by looping this into your SOPs as an organization, that when you are preparing protocols, that there is a patient-centric approach to that, and also that you can also set up SOPs where you're required to provide results, and that is a very easy way to show FDA that you're involving patients in the process. In addition to that, using endpoints that are more patient-centric is obvious, in addition to the more clinical endpoints. But I would share the same question. So I apologize for not having a fantastic answer for you, but I think the jury's still out.
And I think that's a great closing topic, which we touched upon while talking about how regulators should also be inclusive, be focused toward the patient centricity. It's almost time, and so thank you, big thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you to TJ, Shaun, and Leesa to put some time during your busy schedule and helping us to put this webinar together and focusing on the patient centricity. And a big thank you of all of those who have joined pulling out their time from their busy schedule. Some of the audience are being joined from India, and it's almost night, late night in India. So I would like to thank you, all of you, our panelists, audience, and stay connected at pharmashots.com for more insights like this. So this recording will be available probably by tomorrow on our YouTube channel. So you can go there if you want to watch some part of it, or overall, what TJ is saying, what Shaun is saying, and what Leesa is saying. If you want to hear that again, you are very much welcome to go to our YouTube channel and then listen their thoughts again. Thank you, everyone. So it's time for the closure here, and stay engaged, stay curious, and everyone should work together to make our healthcare system better and obviously patient-centric. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.